Glad to see you tonight. I hope that you have had a good day, and we're glad to see you out and study this evening. Let's go to God in prayer. Lord, we thank you so much for the privilege of studying with those who are committed to you. We thank you for the gift of life, and we are thankful for how you have guided us through every step of this day. We ask, Lord, that you would meet us in this place and open our minds and our hearts to your word, that we might be better disciples of Christ. We pray even now that you would be with those who have been impacted by the storms that have ripped throughout Kentucky and other states over the past several days. We pray, oh God, that they would feel your presence and that resources would begin to connect that would meet their needs. We thank you for being a very present help in the time of trouble. We lift to you tonight Brother King, who is in the hospital. We lift to you Sister Remy, who is in the hospital. We lift to you Sister Ann Norman, who is at home convalescing. And we ask, God, that they would feel your love and that even now you would touch them from the crown of their heads to the sole of their feet. Bless them. In Jesus' name, amen. We're in a series that is based on questions that have been submitted by members of this congregation. And so we've been just working through those questions, attempting to answer those questions during Bible study time over the past several weeks. I'm glad to see you back in church in Bible study. Good to see you. Hope the kids doing well. You ain't got to be ashamed. We're glad to see you. And I see a little college student over there who is, you still in college, aren't you? What classification are you? You're in your last year of y'all stand up, please. She's in her last year of pharmacy school. So that means you have graduated from UK. You've graduated from UK from undergrad. Now you're in pharmacy school. Wow, and you're in your last year. That's amazing. She was a little girl in this church. She would sit back there, and she, Sister Cole wants y'all to know she was in Teen Summit, and now she is in her last year of pharmacy school, and I guess that means this time next year you roll up to Walgreens and get your prescription filled. You might see that face filling your prescription, and so we're very proud of all of our young people. We've been in a series taking questions from members. They have spanned the gamut. And tonight, the question is simply, how do you develop and cultivate relationships? How do you develop and cultivate relationships? And that's a question that is always in season, because all of us need relationships. All of us value relationships to some degree. And all of us struggle with relationships to some extent. Okay? I'll say it again. All of us need relationships. So it don't matter how good you think you is, how much money you have, how self-sufficient you may judge yourself to be, you need relationships. You need relationships because it's encoded in our very DNA. A baby that is born cannot survive if you just drop that baby off and leave it in the forest, right? No, that baby needs relationship. Babies need to be touched, held, smiled at. Babies need to be fed, nurtured, cultivated. And during that, in order to survive, and during that process, it is being encoded into that baby's DNA that relationship is necessary for the duration of that baby's life. relationships is something that we need. And it doesn't matter how old you get, you need relationships. When you're young, you value relationships with your peers and older people. When you get a little older, you value relationships with people who are even older than you and people who are younger than you. You don't want to get old and not have relationships with people who are younger than you. Because if you're not careful, people who are older than you begin to pass off the scene. So your grandparents and aunts, uncles, great-grandparents, y'all come from families like that? I came from a family where we had my grandma, so when I was a kid, I remember my great-great-grandmother. I looked up her Ancestry.com the other day. We called her Mama Bertha. She was born in 1894. She died in 1993. And I remember my great-great-grandmother, Bertha. And I remember when Grandma Bertha went home to be with the Lord. I remember sitting at the funeral, and my question was, why is she wearing glasses? She's supposed to be asleep. That was 1993. She had 2 daughters and 1 son. Hoyle was her son, Mamie Ruth and Louise. They were sisters a year apart. They lived together from, I guess, the day that my great-grandmother put my great-granddaddy out. She did. She wanted him to buy her a house. He wanted to start his own construction company. So he decided he was going to start the construction company and not buy the house. This was in the days that you could, that married couples could live in the projects together. That changed as we got close to the 20th century. They lived in one of the projects in Nashville. She wanted the house. He told her no, he was going to start a construction company. She said to me that the next morning she packed his clothes, put it on his suitcase, set his alarm for work, one of those old ticking clocks that would sound with a little bell on top, so that he would know when to go to work. And that's when she moved in with her sister, Mamie Ruth. Mamie Ruth and Louise and Mom Bertha lived together that was probably somewhere in the late 40s, until Grandma Bertha died in 93, and then Nanny, that was Louise, she died in 2011, and Mamie Ruth died in 2004. And so Mom Bertha's gone, 1896, 1993. Mayru was the sweetest thing. 1919, 2004. Louise, called her Nanny, 1921, 2011. Gone. Mamie Ruth didn't have no kids. Nanny did have kids, but her kids preceded her in death. So that generation is gone. And so I came in the world with a great-great-grandmother, a great-grandmother, a great-aunt. They lived together, Mayru and Louise. They were pistols. And there was another generation. And now I preached Nanny's eulogy and all of Nanny's grandchildren's eulogies, except my dad. Only one living. Only one living. And so now my dad, y'all know last Thursday he came to my house? Oh, really? Got off on Fern Valley, called me. I was in a meeting downtown. Hey, open the door. I'm not home to open the door. What are you talking about? I just got off at your exit. You mean you're not going to call me and tell me ahead of time as to whether or not? But I knew what that was because at this point, he buried he's buried his older siblings over the last several years. Mama died 2 years ago. Grandmama died 12 years ago, 13 years ago. Great-grandmother died in 1993. The point I'm making, relationships for him don't reach up anymore. They now reach down. So he got to deal with me. That gets on his nerves, but he has grandchildren that save him. So we need relationships. We value relationships because you begin to miss those people who y'all got grandmamas. Y'all remember grandmamas? Anybody remember their grandmama? Did y'all have good grandmamas? Yes. I want the Lord to give a contract on grandmamas because grandmamas are the sweetest things ever. And I had a bunch I didn't have no granddaddy except Daddy Burnett. But Daddy Burnett didn't deal with children. You know, he was one of them old men who didn't like children. And he died when I was like 10, but he didn't like us no way. So I didn't really know Daddy Burnett all that much. It was, don't breathe on my food. Don't tell you to get him a glass of water. Don't grab my glass like that. Anyway, we had a bunch of sweet grandmamas who gave a lot of kisses and baked a lot of pies and cakes. Relationships at the early part of life, they reach up. Relationships in the mid part of life, they reach out. And then you get to a place in life where relationships gotta reach down. Which means if you're only adept with relationships that go this way, you'll be poor. What's wrong with that? Oh, goodness. Mike, I need you to do your job better. Here I am trying to teach. All right. Is it? What's wrong with this clip? All right. So, if all you are comfortable with are relationships that go outward, you're going to be disappointed at some point in your life. If all you have is relationships that go up, you're going to be disappointed at some point in your life. So you've got to learn how to cultivate relationships that are above you or that with people who are beyond you, with people who are beside you, and with people who are coming behind you. You know? And that can be a struggle as it relates to relationships, but it is a necessity of relationships as you grow in life. So the question about how to cultivate relationships is so very necessary. I'll say it again. We all need relationships. We all value relationships. We all struggle with relationships. And often, the struggle with relationship is not with the relationships, not always, that are beyond us. Because all of us, when I start talking about grandparents, y'all start smiling because you have some good memories. Now, sometimes, when we talk about our parents, we have good memories. But there sometimes begins a bit, for some people, a struggle. Especially as you begin to get older, right? And there can be a battle of the wills and of expertise and opinions. And then relationships certainly struggle here. Why? Because as you grow with your peers or with your spouse, life changes. And when life changes, sometimes you change. You change is not a bad thing because if you don't change, it means you're not evolving. Evolution is a part of life, and this brings complexity as it relates to relationships. How do you handle that? How do you engage family and friends who y'all not quite on the same wavelengths? Well, I think the Word of God helps us because I think understanding relationships appropriately, and I believe understanding relationships biblically will help us to navigate the different tiers of relationship that we grow through in this life. Remember that it is the goal for the Christian to always exercise a Christian ethic, which means this, that in everything I do, I want to be like Christ. So in my relationships, in my business dealings, in my career development, as a Christian, my goal is to reflect Jesus Christ, his ethics, the way he would handle people. That's what I must do in my life. So number one, we learn from Jesus that authentic relationships are built on truth, are built on empathy, humility, so truth is we got to be able to speak honestly to one another. That I've got to be able to express my truth, and you must be able to express your truth. Here's another thing. You've also got to have a close enough relationship with reality to be able to distinguish truth. That ain't on your sheet, but it's something that you need. Y'all know what I've learned? I'll tell you. You got a lot of people who, in the words of my daughter Zoe, who are delulu. That's what she said. She said they are delulu. That's short for delusional. It is hard to have relationship with people who have an estranged relationship with reality. Why is that difficult? Because if they have an estranged relationship with reality, you can never get to the truth. If you can't get to the truth, it is difficult to foster a relationship that will flourish and that will be mutually beneficial. Make sense? So truth, authentic relationships are built on truth. Now, when you tell your truth, you know whether or not you're in a relationship that you ought to continue to cultivate and keep by how the person that you speak your truth to responds to your truth. If they're immediately offended by your truth, as opposed to becoming curious about your truth, it's a wrong relationship. Why do I say that? Because we have a choice to be offended. You do not have to be offended. You don't have to be offended. The offense is a choice. And it's a choice you make by standing in the authenticity of who you are and how you're showing up in certain spaces, in the world, in certain relationships. Now, if you show up authentically, if you show up with integrity, then truth is not something that you bargain with, because there is nothing more costly than denigrating the currency of truth. Truth is necessary. Empathy is necessary. Empathy are the lenses with which we see other people. We have to empathize with that. That simply means that's not sympathy. Sympathy is, oh, I feel sorry for you. My grandmother had a box of sympathy cards that she kept on her table because everybody who had somebody who died, she got out that same box of sympathy cards, took a card out, rolled a note inside, put it in the mailbox because she was sympathizing with them. She wanted to send sympathy to them. Empathy says, I'm not just going to sympathize with you, I'm going to put my feet in your sandals, in your shoes, in your experience, so that I can understand how it feels, or how, as close as I can feel to what it means to be you. Empathy is critical. Now, also empathy can show up by asking the question, what does it feel being on the other side of me? How does it feel to be opposite of me? Have you ever asked somebody that question? Have you? No? Ask yourself that question. Those of you who are married, go home, ask your spouse, what does it feel to be on the other side of me? If you're not married, go ask your boo, what does it feel to be on the other side of me? You ain't got a boo, ask your sneaky link. What does it feel to be on the other side of me? Ask your coworkers. Because often we feel that we're doing one thing, but the people who are on the other side of us experience it in a different way. The cultivation of empathy demands that you not only see others, but that you see yourself. And that you do some stuff that can get on people's nerves, that can offend people, that can harm people. That's what empathy is rooted in. Humility. Humility is important because ego is a destroyer of relationships. And then sacrificial love. 2, biblical love is not sentimental, it is active. It is active. It is active. It is active. Honest, and deeply invested in others. Deeply invested in others. It is active, it is honest, and it is deeply invested in others. That's biblical love. It's active, so it's not passive. It's honest, it does not lie. It deeply invested in others. That is, it takes root. You pour in. 3, vulnerability is not weakness. It is the doorway to depth. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's the doorway to depth. So let's go to Romans 12 and unfold these principles about developing relationships. In Romans 12, it says this: love must be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted to one another in love, honor one another above yourselves, never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer, share with the Lord's people who are in need, practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and what? Do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. So here, Paul says that relationships with others must be rooted in, what's the big word? Love. Must be rooted in love. And here he says this. He says in verse 9, love must be sincere or genuine. What's the opposite of that? Can't be fake. Why do you think the Apostle Paul included that as a criteria for love? Why do you think Paul included that as a criteria for love? Sincerity. Huh? Yeah, fake. You got fake love. You got dependent love. Yes. Why else? Why is sincerity? Honest. Yeah. Yeah. She said it's honest. It's real. You're exactly right. So love must be sincere because love that is insincere is no love at all. Now it may be expediency. It may be coercion. It may be a way to get you to do what a person wants you to do. But when love is not sincere, it's not love. So sincerity is central and critical to the flourishing of love because without sincerity, love just ain't love. And so Paul wants us to see this so that we not only can check our motives, but that we can be on guard for love that looks insincere or impure. Okay. Is affection a part of love? You can't love without affection, but you can have affection without love. Right? So I guess he asked, is affection a part of love? So you can have affection without love, but you can't have love without affection. Does that make sense? So this is also where in the New Testament, while we have 4 words for love, you have agape love, which is unconditional love. You have philos love, which is brotherly love. You have eros love, which is your affectionate love, to keep it PG. And then you have storge love, which is self-love. But sincerity, Paul says, is a part of, and the word here is agape love. Because you don't need necessarily sincerity for, and I remember when you're reading the Bible, in the New Testament, you're reading what language? It's Greek. And so the Greek language has more words for one word than the English language has to transliterate it. Which is why love in your Bible can be love, 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 love. But in the Greek translation, in the Greek manuscripts, love can be agape. Agape is sincere. Make sense? Philos, your brother. See the distinction? It can also be, he had eros for her. See the distinction? And then it can be storge yourself. Y'all get it? In English, all that's love. But in Greek, you got 4 words, which are reduced to 1 in the English language. Paul here in Romans is speaking about agape love. Called it what? Dissimulation, okay.
That type of love, that agape love, is just given and no return on it, no investment. It's just gone.
Uh-huh.
And then Paul, as on into the New Testament, he talks about you have to earn your love.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't just love everybody, because you can get in trouble.
Well, that's where so he brought up a point that Paul later on in the New Testament talks about. You can't just love everybody. People have to earn your love. Again, that's where we get into the differences. Because when Paul begins to talk about the nuances with love, that's when he gets into philos love. So agape love is for everybody. You know, I would say, I love everybody. That's saying, I agape everybody. Now, most of us don't really mean it. But that's what we are aspiring toward. Brotherly love is one of those things. So brotherly love, I got some brothers who I love to death. And those brothers can come to my house. Terry Mackey comes to my house. He steals my ties. He can't wear the rest of my clothes, but he steals ties. But he's my brother, and so I let him into my house. Now, next time he comes to Louisville, he's going to sit on the porch. But if need be, you know, I'll throw a pillow out there, let him sleep out there so he won't steal nothing. That's philos love. Agape love is a general, all-encompassing love where we aspire to look beyond people's faults and love like Christ. And so what Paul is saying here in Romans, agape love, it's got to be sincere. 2, he says, be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourself. That's where that humility takes place. So you got to be devoted to one another in love. Why? Because being devoted to one another in lust won't last. Being devoted to one another in what the relationship can do for you won't last. Being devoted for what you can get out of it won't last. The only way that a relationship will grow to the standard that Christ holds before us is when we are devoted to one another in love. Honor yourselves above honor one another above yourself. Now, understand, brothers and sisters, it don't mean to debase yourself for the benefit of somebody else. It means be mindful, be empathetic, be kind. Here's a phrase you ought to put in the margins of your notes. Honor the needs of others as holy. Honor the needs of others. So when you talk about honoring others above yourselves, it means that you see them, you see their needs, and you honor that as holy. You honor that as holy. 3, rejoice with those who what? Rejoice. Mourn with those who what? Mourn. It means that in order to cultivate relationships, you must be willing to meet people where they are. If people are mourning, that ain't the time for you to come by with balloons and talk about everybody ought to be laughing. No, you sit down. Sit down. It ain't that time. And don't you show up to nobody's wedding with no sad face, looking like you sucking on lemons. When everybody else gets up and do boots on the fan, you get your sorry self up and do boots on the floor. Get your fan and smack it. That's what it means. Mourn with those who mourn. Rejoice with those who rejoice. It means that a part of me, and remember the lesson, the question was, how do I cultivate meaningful relationships? A part of cultivating meaningful relationships is learning how to shift with the moment, with the environment. And this is, I will submit to you, one of the most difficult places of cultivating relationships, because all of us have certain times that make us uncomfortable. Time of mourning is an uncomfortable time. When you have to sit in a space with people who are processing the loss, you are out of control, you can't make it better, and all you can do is sit there. Many of us, we can't make meaningful relationships because we don't know what it is to stick with a person in the worst time of their life. Because we think that when we show up, we got to say something. When the best thing you can do is show up and shut up. It's called the ministry of presence. Y'all know what showing up and shutting up is? Because otherwise you start saying stuff like God needs another flower for his garden. Like God can plant all the flowers around here, but God can't plant no flowers in heaven? That's dumb. That's just idiotic. So I mean, and think about how painful that is. Somebody, their loved one has transitioned unexpectedly. And you got the audacity to come to the hospital and talk about the Lord need another flower for his garden. Well, how sorry is that God? I want a God who can go down to Kroger's and get some more flowers for his garden. I want a God who can go to Home Depot and get some seeds and put them in the ground and make them grow for a flower. I don't need God to pluck my mama. But do we not say things like that? And those things don't make people feel better. So a good practice for cultivating the relationship, for cultivating meaningful relationships, is knowing when to be silent and when to talk. And sometimes I've been pastoring almost 20 years. I am getting worse at bereavement calls. I have nothing to say. You got nothing to say? I, try to make it to everybody's funerals and everybody's relatives' funerals and all that kind of stuff. And they say, we got you down to say nothing. I ain't got nothing to say. I'm here in my black suit. Y'all see me. Because what am I going to say that's going to bring comfort to a mother who has buried her child? What am I going to say that's going to bring comfort to children who are having to say goodbye to their mother or their father? The best thing I can offer is, I'm here. Here's my hand. You need me to hold? I got Kleenex. That's what it means to mourn with those who mourn. Remember Job's friend? Job's friends, they were great until they started talking. They started talking. It was fine for a whole chapter. They just sat there with Job and they wept, and then they decided to have a conversation, and they wanted to, who did it? Whose fault is this? Blame game. They did the blame game, as Reverend Lett is saying. And so when people are mourning, a way to cultivate that relationship is learning to be there while they mourn. Sometimes that means standing at the graveyard until they're ready to go. Sometimes it means showing up at the funeral home, sitting there, just being a presence. Sometimes it means going to the hospital, being there with them as long as they need to be there. That's what it means to mourn people who mourn. And you rejoice with people who rejoice. So you may have been a bridesmaid for 19 times, but don't you dare show up being the Debbie Downer. Put on your little pastel dress, walk yourself down the aisle, smile at everybody, dance, and if you gotta cry, cry when you get home by yourself, and don't tell nobody. That's what it means to rejoice with. It makes sense?
Pastor,
Yes.
that is such a profound understanding. And I submit to you, that goes beyond mourning. I was fortunate enough to be in Navajo Indian reservation right after the Navajo and the Hopi Indians were having a land dispute out in Nebraska, and they have a tradition called sharing time. And not just in mourning, but they would go into each other's house and just sit still and just be there and just look around and just be in their presence. They're not mourning, but instead of getting all this verbiage and talking, they just be in each other's presence.
Right.
Not in mourning, but in relationships. And I found that profound because oftentimes we think we got to chatter.
Yep.
We got to volley. And sometimes it's not that important. It's the presence that, as you just articulate, in time of mourning.
Yep. So it's the presence is critical, and it is understanding how to maximize your. If you want to have good relationships, you can't have relationships without events. And most of those events are not planned. Yes, ma'am.
I hear people all the time say, he's in a better place.
Mm-hmm.
She's in a better place. How do you know they're in a better place if you haven't been there?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that's something that's nothing I don't try. I try not to say. I believe in heaven real bad. But I know I remember my grandmama died. That was the worst pain. That was the worst loss that I had experienced. And I remember sitting on the second row, and I could not stop crying. And people kept coming up saying the most weird stuff to me. And a lady who I absolutely love and adore, she grabbed me. I was crying. I was a mess. And I know I was old. And she grabbed me by both of my shoulders, and she said, "Be a man."
Oh my goodness. Oh, that
Be a
was
man.
awful.
You're supposed to be a preacher.
Oh my goodness.
And I thought, well, good googly moogly. I can't cry at my grandmama's funeral. I believe that my grandmother's in heaven. I believe that God goes to prepare a place for us. Catherine Sears, who passed away, I remember on her deathbed in 2015. I was sitting at the foot of it. She said to me, "Pastor, I'm ready to go home. I'm fine with it. I've noticed that nobody who has died before is peeking in our windows trying to get back over here. So I think I'll go over there and see what they have experienced." She said that she was dying of cancer. She would die a few weeks later after that conversation. I believe there's a place. But it doesn't stop human hurt.
Right.
It doesn't stop human disappointment. And so in relationships, some of the best thing that we can do is not, God doesn't need a spokesperson, and God doesn't need an attorney. And often what we say is aimed to try to get God off the hook. God don't need that. What you can do and what I can do is learn the gift of just being there. We're mourning with those who mourn. And that is something that you've got to cultivate in relationship. There are people, half of this room has this experience. You experienced a significant loss, and people who were significant to you were not there. Has anybody experienced that pain? And if you've experienced that pain, you know what it feels to be mourning and the people who you expected to mourn with you, they didn't mourn. If you've ever thrown a party and the people that you wanted there most at the party couldn't bother, you know what it is to rejoice. One of the today I did my first graduation, and it was wonderful. I didn't graduate. I was there for other people. Oh, thank you.
That's something to be congratulated on. You did your first graduation.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it was my first one this year. But, so pray for me, because I got 7 more to go. You know what the hardest thing is watching those beautiful, brilliant students dressed in their academic regalia, lined up to come across the stage. And there are some who have big families, their cousins, their grandmamas, everybody show up, they're rooting for them. And there is always at least one, but most of the time there's more than one, who don't have anybody. They drive themselves, or they catch the bus, or they ride with a friend. Ain't nobody there to rejoice. And I often think about those children, how much resilience is necessary to stand in y'all know how big Freedom Hall is. You got all them people. And you see all those people are connected to somebody who is graduating, and yet you stand on that stage after your name is being called and ain't nobody up there hollering for you. And that's for a variety of reasons, which is why if you want to cultivate relationships, learn how to celebrate people, how to rejoice with people. You cannot be the star of every party. And neither should you be the dead person at every funeral. Does that make sense? So you gotta, Paul says, mourn with those who mourn and rejoice with those who rejoice. So, and then also, you gotta live in harmony and do not be proud. This is all from Romans 12, 9 through 16. Live in harmony with others and do not be proud. That's another way of saying, be humble. What did Kendrick Lamar say? Sit down. Be humble. Yeah. Sit down. That's a profound statement, because these teachers, they know that to stand up is the power stance. Ain't that what they call it? But when you sit down among the students, that is a stance of humility that fosters greater response and greater investment. Yep, get on the same level. You got to get crisscross applesauce. We don't say Indian style no more. If you grew up saying Indian style, throw Indian style out of your vocabulary because it is culturally insensitive. You got to say crisscross applesauce. I don't understand how applesauce crisscrosses, but it rhymes, and we're going to go with it, all right? All right. So he says, live in harmony, do not be proud. And I think do not be proud is one of the best ways to live, because we may be positioned in a more prosperous way at one point in our lives, but keep on living. Some of the same people who you looked down on earlier may be people who are propping you up later. I spent a lot of time in nursing homes as a pastor. I guess y'all can tell that my life experiences are kind of spent in graveyards and in funeral homes and in hospitals and in nursing homes. It is. I need to go when I leave here tonight. I don't think I'm going to be able to get there because I don't have enough time. I have a meeting at 8:30. But anyways, when I go there, it's interesting to notice the kinds of people who are side by side. People who go to a nursing home every now and then. Walk through there. Talk to the people. And you will find people who have spent their lives as medical doctors, as renowned educators, as, architects and all manner of. And then you'll go down and you'll find people who they might have been, some type of blue-collar worker or some type of worker who wasn't esteemed as highly as others. And they all be on the same floor, all exercising in the same rehab facility, all assigned the same nurses. It doesn't matter who they were when they were 35, 45, 55. But at this particular point in life, it's all led them to the same place, the same floor, with the same nurses, using the same rehab facility. You got to be careful in life when you are so proud that you can't find commonality with all humans, with everybody. Christianity, I think at its center, is not to make us better than anybody. It is to help us to see everybody. Jesus was a radical egalitarian. So he made a place for women. He made a place for Samaritans. He would spar with the Jews. He would sit down with tax collectors and with wine bibbers and with prostitutes, because his very example says that you ought not value just a certain class of people. You ought to value everybody. You ought to value everybody. Kanye West said it, which I know we can't quote Kanye West now in 2025, but he was right in 2005 when he said that Jesus walks with, and he listed the people whom Jesus walks with. Okay? So we got to learn how to live in harmony and do not be proud. So moving relationships from surface to substance demands authenticity. Authenticity. So I would ask, do you know who you is? Now, if you don't know who you is, you will not be able to cultivate meaningful relationships, because you wear a mask. And as soon as people discover that you wear a mask, they'll probably remove themselves from you. Or when they discover that you wear a mask, you'll remove yourself from them. Because inauthenticity will not cultivate meaningful relationships. You just got to be real. Be who you is. Just be who you is. 2, active listening. Active listening means at some point you got to shut up. And you've got to listen for what the person says. Now, let the church shout, curiosity. Curiosity. You listen because you got questions. You're curious. Not listening to respond. You know, if those of you who've been in a relationship, you know what it is to listen to respond. You just waiting for them to finish finish your statement, because I got you. I got you, because in 1989, you did it, and you're listening to respond as opposed to active. Active listening means I've got to think through what you're saying. When you think through what a person is saying, you got to think past what they're saying. Because what a person is saying is not all that there is. There is a root that their statement is coming from. And so if you listen just to respond, you're going to miss it. So you got to listen actively, listen with curiosity, so that you can really question what they say. Somebody said something in my presence the other day. Woo! It was hard for me to digest. And I said, I'm going to practice active listening. I really want to just put on the spot. But I simply began to interrogate what she said. Well, why do you say that? Well, what you mean by that? So what led to those conclusions? Now, she talked herself into a hole. She came out of that question. I should have been a lawyer, because I would have been better than Johnny Cochran. I could have got... No, I doubt it. Okay. Johnny had a lot of prowess. I forget. I'm talking to people who don't remember Johnny Cochran. Some of y'all remember Johnny Cochran. Yeah. Y'all remember Johnny Cochran? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If the glove don't fit, you must have quit. I can rhyme just like Johnny. And Johnny got OJ off, and OJ should have went to jail. We can say that now in 2025. We couldn't say that in, 1995? We couldn't say that back then. OJ should have been locked underneath the jail. OJ was guilty of, what was her name? Nicole Brown. He was guilty of that, and he was guilty of a whole bunch more. He was guilty of Nicole, Michelle, Maisha, and Neosha. Um, ain't no telling what all Brother OJ had done. But anyways, I digress. I don't know why I had that pop in my mind. Yeah. What's wrong? What's about Johnny Cochran? Yeah. Anyways, but sometimes when you active listen, it'll help you not get so mad at people. Because you'll launch in and you'll be ready to just snap at somebody when really if you just take a step back and just interrogate what they have to say, it may give you more insight into why they made the statement that they have made. And you'll realize they ain't even worth your anger. Yeah, because, she said sometimes you listen and you realize it's not worthy of respect. That's so real. Because think about it, y'all. You only have 24 hours of the day. You need to sleep 8 hours of those 24. How many of y'all sleeping 8 hours a night? See, that's a shame. So that means, how many of y'all sleeping 6 hours a night? Mm-hmm. Yep. Some of y'all like me, about 5, 4. Yep. Yeah. I ain't got I'm you cutting into my sleep if I got to respond to you. So I need to listen actively to understand, is the conversation even worthy of a response? And if I listen actively enough, then I can really begin to assess whether or not this is a relationship that even has the capacity to be cultivated. You can't cultivate a relationship with everybody. Some relationships, they don't have a capacity. Some people you can't talk to. So you got to active listening. So that's why some of y'all been in relationships for a long time with people, and you keep trying to get them to do one thing, and they won't do it. But you ain't listening to them, and they sure ain't listening to you. And so y'all been in a stalemate trying. Have you been one of them arguments? You trying to get them to do one thing, they're going to do another. They ain't going. They ain't going. You got active listening. 3, trust. You can't have a relationship with a thief. We had a crackhead named Crazy Horse who, I shouldn't say it like that. Crazy Horse was a crackhead who lived on our street. My dad was fond of paying him to cut grass. Crackheads in the 90s could do a whole lot that fentanyl addicts cannot do in the 2020s. I don't say that as a disparagement. I do say it as a critique of how drugs have changed in a very, we were locking up crack addicts in the 1990s. Now we have a fentanyl epidemic where people who are on fentanyl are dying. It's a different kind of thing. And fentanyl addicts, there's probably a fentanyl addict in here. It's not a joke. I'm not joking. Look around. Look at your neighbor and say, is it you? Now, if it is, I'm being dead serious. I've buried too many of my family members to fentanyl. Too many of them. And I can tell you this, fentanyl addicts can look just like everybody in this room right now. You would not be able to tell that they are on it because it apparently doesn't really affect the weight as much as, crack. You could tell when crackheads were on crack because they look like crackheads. And I call them crackheads. We didn't have another way to call them crackheads in the 90s. Crazy Horse was a crackhead who looked like a crackhead, but we loved Crazy Horse. He was always around. But what I was saying was a public service announcement. If you on fentanyl tonight, you need to get off because it is a detriment to your life, to your health, and to your survival. You need to. So if you need to come talk to me after Bible study, we can get you to a drug counselor. But that fentanyl, it is nothing to deal with. And some of y'all are buying weed from these Negroes down here in Newburgh who got their weed laced with fentanyl. And you need to watch where you buy that stuff from. I didn't mean to say that tonight. Chalk it up to the Holy Ghost. I'll say this. I've done way too many people's funerals under 40 this year I'm bothered by this. And we don't talk about it. You know, we say that people, you know how black folk cover up stuff? And we don't talk about what it actually is. I don't know what drug they got out here, but I know that it's taking too many people out and taking too many people out who are under 40, who are in the prime of their life, and they're leaving small kids in the aftermath. So I don't, I'll just be honest. If you're on fentanyl, get off. Try something else. Run a marathon or something. If you got to get high, get high. You know, back when I was a kid, they would say this. If you must walk with God. If you must get high on the Holy Ghost. If you must get drunk on the Spirit. I think that's a good line. And I think that whoever I'm saying this for tonight is, you need to hear it. You need to hear it. Did y'all learn anything in Bible study tonight? What did y'all learn? Brother Pipers, what are we going to do about it? We're going to work with them at home. All right. All right, Sister Dreer. Our kids have been back in the back doing their Bible study. But as I was saying, since our kids are here, fentanyl kills. And we ought to stay clear of it always. And don't buy your drugs from drug dealers on the streets. Don't buy drug dealers from nobody. Don't do drugs at all. Nancy Reagan said don't do drugs.
Just say no.
Just say no. But too many of us have said yes. Uh-huh. Yep. You're exactly right. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for your bravery in sharing that. You're exactly right. It's serious, and we hear things as Christians, as church people, and we think, that we're not that we're not a person who could ever experience that. If you want a gateway to fentanyl, all you got to do is have a surgery. Have a significant surgery where you're placed on Percocets. Do you know how many people become addicted to pills based on that? And then, you know, it generally goes from one level to another. And yeah, thank you, Sister Biggers. She knows what it is to be addicted. So she know I ain't lying. And so when we talk about fentanyl, and I hope this is a safe space for, I'm not judging anybody. I'm not judging anybody, but I don't want to do another, you know, it's been too much this year. And you're trying to get people to understand what has happened. And my generation normalized drugs to an unacceptable level. And we had some sipping on some scissor, sipping on some sipping on some scissor. I had 2 friends that died of sipping on some scissor. And guess what? They wasn't folk out on the street sagging their pants. They were preachers. They were pastors, had churches. And sipping on that scissor totally caused their hearts to explode. And those people have kids in the world today. All of us stand, we're all candidates for that kind of stuff, all right? So I don't know what that has to do with developing relationships, but maybe that means that you need to help